Thank you so much. Can you hear me well? OK, I know it's the last time of the day, almost closing, but I would like to show you what we are doing. So today we're going to learn how we can convert from a HAR that maybe some of you are not that familiar. You're going to learn right now into an OpenTelemetry trace in order to improve our observability. Today we are going to talk about OpenTelemetry, quick introduction, HAR file, so you're going to discover what it is, and ThousandEyes, briefly just because we are using it. And then we are going to explain how we are converting from a HAR into an OpenTelemetry trace, then how we are streaming, doing that processing and the streaming in the architecture. You're going to see how it's worked with a demo, and then we are going to end up with a lesson learned. All of you know already about OpenTelemetry, so we're going to skip that. Let's jump directly into the HAR. How many of you have used the HAR in the past months? Like, almost nobody, right? Because this is a tool that is only used for debugging, right? So it collects all the interaction that you're having in your web page. So all the requests that have been going through, all the resources that have been downloaded, or all those things. It is stored in JSON format. It contains sensitive data. That's also something that we need to bear in mind. But as I mentioned, everyone only uses for debugging when there is a problem. Something like the support team asks you, like, can you provide to me with the HAR file so we can see what is going on in your application? So this is kind of what it is. Let's talk about ThousandEyes. ThousandEyes is just an application to monitor the network. And we have one of our tests, is the page load test. We simulate how a user will load a page and then getting all the resources. As you can see on that screenshot, we are getting all the resources, all the requests that a user have when they load that page. So this is the HAR, and we have it in ThousandEyes. But we want to have also outside, so let's convert it into a trace. This is the process that we are doing now. In a HAR, you're going to find out several requests. Each of those requests is going to be converting a span of our trace. And each of those spans is going to have like the following fields. We're going to have like the name for it's going to contain the method of that request and the target that we are hitting. Also, we are going to have always the kind client, because we are calling a server. We are calling a web page, so we are a client. We're also going to have the start time and end time, and also the status. So if there are any error, it's going to be a status error. If not, OK. And then we're going to have the trace ID and span ID that we auto-generate by ourselves. We also follow semantic convention for the attribute of our span. That's key to add extra meaning to our data. And here we can see things like the HTTP request method, the server address, which is the host that we are calling, the server port, also the URL full that we are hitting, and the response code, where we can see if there are any kind of error or not. So remember, semantic convention is super important for the span attribute. And then we also have to think about it, headers. So OpenTelemetry considers them as optional because they might be a security risk, because they might contain cookies, authorization headers, and many other things. In ThousandEyes, we are not streaming them for two reasons. Security, of course, and they might be quite heavy. So you might have like a lot of headers that are not really useful for debugging a problem. And then, of course, we need to understand the resource attribute. The resource attributes are who is generating that telemetry data. In that case, it's going to be ThousandEyes with an account. We're also going to have like a test running that, generating that data. We're going to have the test name, test type, and test ID. And of course, it's going to be an agent running that data. So we're going to have the agent ID, name, and location. And of course, we're going to have also a permalink to jump from the place where you're visualizing your span into ThousandEyes for having a more deep investigation of the network issue. Let's move now to the architecture that we have to convert and stream that data. In that picture, you can see that we are receiving all the data from Kafka. So there we are receiving all the telemetry data that our agents are producing, containing the HAR. And then we have our first collector. The first collector is converting that HAR into a trace, and we are processing, and we send it to the integrations collector. I have to explain also here that our users create an integration between the test, the page load test, and their observability backend. So they say all the test data from that web page is going to go to Honeycomb or Grafana or any other. And then in the integrations collector, we check all the integrations, say the data from that test go to that observability backend. Let's zoom in a little bit on those collectors. First, we are going to convert all the Kafka data into the Kafka data that contain the HAR into an OpenTelemetry trace, and we are going to filter in the first processor. Why we filter? Remember, we receive all the data from our agents from all the tests from ThousandEyes, but only the one that are going to be sent to observability backend is the one that we are interested in. The rest, we can skip it, right? So we filter out here. On the attribute processor, what we are doing is we are enriching that data. What we receive from Kafka are things like test ID or agent ID. So we need to enrich also with the agent location or with the test name. We are doing it there. And of course, we are batching for performance reasons. Once we have all that data, we export it to the integrations collector. What are we doing here? We receive the data, and we are processing. In the processing, in mind that a data point is going to be sent, or a trace, sorry, is going to be sent to several observability backend because the customer want to have that redundancy because they are doing a migration for any reason. We need to duplicate that trace, and we need to add an extra attribute, which is going to be the integration ID. And now on the OTLP routing, which is just an extension of the OTLP exporter, we see the attribute integration ID, and then from that integration ID, we go to that observability backend. So here, what we are doing is routing that data to the different observability backends. Cool. Now we have our data generated in ThousandEyes, and our customer can see on their observability backends. You also might be asking why we do have two collectors instead of having just a single one. There are two reasons for that. First one is because it is going to be domain business. So the first collector is for traces, processing them and filtering them. And the second collector is for routing. So it depends on the integrations. Also because they are going to scale at a different pace. The trace collector is going to scale depending on how much data we receive from Kafka. And the integrations collector is going to scale depending on how many integrations we have in our system. Yeah. So now let's move to the demo. We are going to create a ThousandEyes page load test pointing to Cisco.com, and then we're going to see how the data is going. So here is the result. We can see metrics like the page load time. We also can see metrics like the completion or errors as timeout. But the important part that we would like to highlight today is on the waterfall. In the waterfall, we are going to find out all the requests that are going on for loading that web page. As I mentioned before, that data is quite useful, but only live inside of ThousandEyes. What we are doing today is like we are going to create an integrations in ThousandEyes to say all that data from that test, I want to send it to Jaeger. I am using Jaeger for that use case. So I select OpenTelemetry integration. We put our target. We select our test. We select the signal trace. And then the data is going to start going there. Now we go to Jaeger. We search for traces. And here we have all those nice traces representing our web page load. As I mentioned before, each request is going to be a span. And for each span, we're going to have the attribute representing the HTTP request coming from the semantic convention. And also, we're going to have the ThousandEyes resource attribute identifying who is the resource of our span. Here you can see a screenshot without moving of how an span will look like. So we are going to have like the name, remember, it's going to be the method and the resource that we are hitting. We're going to have also the time, how much time it's going to need, like around 600 milliseconds. Several variety of different attributes for representing the HTTP, like the response code, the method that we are using, and many other. And we're going to have the process, which are the resource attribute that identify ThousandEyes, like which one is your account, which one is your integration, and many others. So now, if we think about it, that's super cool. But let's also take advantage with the observability backends. We can search for errors or response code 400 in our traces. So we can understand if there are any kind of error in our web page loads. Here you can see that there is a problem loading that specific resource in our web page. So you guys, if you run that on your web pages, you're going to discover what your customers are facing every day. But not only that, you can also take advantage of comparing traces and see how much time those traces are taking. So if you say, for example, I want to see all the traces taking more than 7 seconds, and what is the average? So the average is between around 5 seconds. Why is that different between 5 and 7 seconds? So you can compare two traces and see what are the differences. So the differences between those two are like 210 and 245 span. So that means that in one page load, there were a bunch of more requests than in the other. And there is also a big time difference. If you zoom in, this is just a recording, but if you zoom in, you're going to see all the requests that have been done in one and not on the other. So think about how useful it's going to be on your system to understand your web page properly. I want to finish with a lesson learned about that project. Tracing. Everyone talks about microservices talking to each other in a big service mesh and so on. This is a perfect use case, but we need to explore others. Someone was talking also about CI/CD tracing. I consider converting a HAR into an OpenTelemetry trace is a really good one. OpenTelemetry community was quite helpful. They was helping us since the beginning of the project. We created a couple of GitHub issues. They solved it. We even contribute with something that we needed. Semantic convention is key because it allows us to specify the attribute, but also allow us to give extra meaning to those attributes. And the collector, we have several talks today about the collector. It's quite powerful a tool. At the beginning, it's a little bit hard to start, but after that, it's perfect. And remember what we need, performance inside. So we need to have a better monitoring of our system and identify issues before our customer find out. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy.